This burning Ka-52 Alligator, one of Russia's premier attack helicopters, just lost a fight against the RBS-70, a missile from the last century. But honestly, there was no fight at all. So what actually happened?
They were operating over our positions for several days, but nobody could catch them, so they called us in.
So far it sounds like a movie. The right guys show up and sort everything out. Notice, the warning from the second crew came in at the same moment as the explosion. It turned out that the onboard defense systems on Russian helicopters can't detect the RBS-70 missile. And this is a perfect example of how old Swedish technology slips right past modern protection systems. But that's strange, because pilots can clearly see the launches of the FIM-92 Stinger
Атака справа, Stinger.
and the more modern FGM-148 Javelin. Although the Javelin wasn't designed for engaging aerial targets, cases like that do exist.
Generally, my unit hunts enemy equipment, but during a watch rotation I spotted a Russian helicopter flying low and firing on friendly positions. The Javelin locked onto the target at literally the last second. I launched the missile and saw the explosion. The next day, footage came in of a destroyed alligator.
Talk about a miracle. A Javelin taking out a chopper is just insane. That's exactly why the American ATGM made it into this video. Because we cover how this war is turning tactical textbooks into scrap paper. So right now, we're going to figure out, how did the Javelin become an anti-air weapon? And can the RBS-70, or the Stinger, systems actually designed to engage aerial targets, hit ground targets the way the Javelin does? And if you stay sharp through to the end of the video, you'll understand why RBS-70 missiles are invisible to Russian pilots. And what will replace manpads on the battlefield in the future? Because we've noticed that future has already arrived in Ukraine. But before we move forward, don't miss our next exclusive video with 1st Assault Regiment, and
don't forget to subscribe to the Weapons of Victory channel, and hope to see you soon.
Despite the drones hanging in the sky, despite sensors, thermal imagers, and long-range warfare, there are still units on the front line that hunt the enemy the way warriors did thousands of years ago.
For an accurate shot, it's critical to reach your position without being spotted and choose the most advantageous firing line.
They see the target with their own eyes and press the trigger on the instinct of their gut. Except instead of a bow and arrow, they're carrying the FGM-148 Javelin, weighing 22 kilograms. Its missile kills at ranges up to 4 kilometers. But honestly, gut instinct alone isn't quite enough for a precise shot.
Sometimes you have to climb out of cover and stand at full height just to aim. You need 10 to 15 seconds to lock onto the target.
The system won't let you fire until the target is locked by the missile's infrared seeker. And you've got to admit, that's a genuinely useful feature that prevents wasted shots, because one trigger pull costs $200,000. But the main feature of the FGM-148 Javelin is fire and forget. Once the target is locked and the operator hits launch, he can immediately move to a new position. The missile's infrared seeker, which tracks heat, is already on its way and won't get lost.
The Javelin's effectiveness is almost 100%. No protection will help.
This thing operates on a top attack principle. The missile climbs high and comes down on the tank from above, where the armor is thinnest. The first charge blows through the ERA, and the second punches through the main armor. Cages, nets, ERA, doesn't do shit. 8.4 kilos of shaped charge will rip it to pieces. But the Russians have come up with a few tricks to save themselves. The first way to confuse the missile is to pop special smoke that blocks the infrared seeker. The second is to pull up next to burning equipment, hoping the missile will switch its lock to the heat of the fire. But that's a lottery, because Russian ground equipment has no sensors to detect the moment of launch. So Russian tankers who end up in a Javelin's crosshairs can only hope for luck. Russian helicopters, however, do have those sensors. So how are Ukrainians shooting them down with anti-tank weapons? Helicopters do carry UV direction finders that detect the ultraviolet signature from a missile launch. But Ukrainian troops have found ways to fool that protection. If you fire from the shadow of trees or from around the corner of a building, the helicopter's sensors won't pick up the flash at the moment the missile leaves the tube. And here's one more important detail. Before firing, the operator switches from top attack mode to direct attack. The missile flies straight to the target along the shortest possible trajectory. In that mode, the Javelin behaves like a standard manpad, such as the Stinger. But it detonates 8 times more powerfully because its warhead was designed to kill a tank. Does that make the Javelin versatile enough to replace the Stinger? No. The Javelin is not an anti-aircraft weapon. Its effective range of up to 4 kilometers is specified for ground targets. If the target is at an angle greater than 15 degrees above the horizon, the seeker simply won't lock, meaning the operator physically cannot fire. On top of that, the maximum speed of the Javelin missile doesn't exceed 160 meters per second. While the missile is in flight, the target can break out of the engagement zone. Stinger is a different story entirely. That missile flies at 700 meters per second and can chase down not just helicopters, but fixed-wing aircraft too. This compact weapon also operates on a fire-and-forget principle. Once the seeker has locked onto the target's heat signature and the operator pulls the trigger, the missile tracks the target on its own, leaving the fighter free to find cover or get the next missile ready. The Stinger weighs 6 kilograms less than the Javelin, making it easier to handle for the operator. And if you mount it on a vehicle platform, a classic hunt turns into a safari. But can it engage ground targets? Yes, but its high explosive fragmentation warhead weighs just 1 kilogram. What can you actually take out with that? Maybe a car, because against a tank or an IFV, it's nothing more than a mosquito bite. And it's hard to justify firing a missile worth $50,000 just to disable a truck and not even set it on fire. Against helicopters, though, the Stinger is far more dangerous than the Javelin, despite its smaller warhead, because the fragments can damage the rotor, engine, or cockpit, and gravity does the rest. Especially when the rotorcraft is falling from 3,800 meters, which is the Stinger missile's ceiling. The Stinger became a major headache for Russian pilots, so the Russians are forced to operate either at ultra-low altitude while constantly dumping flares, or at altitudes the Stinger can't reach. And when that happens, they call in an RBS-70 crew. Although the modular design of the Swedish manpad looks vintage, it actually allows for fast deployment into position. The crew is 3 people, but the system's total weight exceeds 80 kilograms, which means it's a completely different style of hunting. Not searching for targets, but setting an ambush.
Our tactic looks like this. We find a position, camouflage ourselves carefully, and wait for the target. When it appears, we shoot it down.
If the target is at maximum range, anywhere from 7 to 9 kilometers depending on the variant, and at altitudes up to 5 kilometers, the chances of survival are nearly zero. Even if the pilot spots the missile or someone warns him about the launch, there's no avoiding the explosion, because the Swedish missile also reaches speeds of 700 meters per second. And here's the thing, fooling the RBS-70 with flares is impossible, because the operator guides the missile with a laser beam all the way to impact. Even if the pilot dumps every flare he has, the missile keeps coming. But usually the pilot only finds out about the attack at the moment of the explosion. Beyond the launchers themselves, Ukraine has received Swedish Giraffe 75 radars, which work in tandem with the RBS-70. With that radar, targets can be detected at ranges up to 75 kilometers. So the operators have plenty of time to get ready for the enemy.
Beyond shooting down helicopters and aircraft, it turned out to be quite effective against UAVs as well.
Ukrainian operators also discovered that the RBS-70 with the bolide missile works excellently against Shaheeds. The laser guidance allows the operator to manually steer onto a drone that barely emits any heat at all. And what about ground targets? Thanks to a fragmentation warhead with a shaped charge effect, a bolide-type missile can punch through light armor. But the real advantage is something else entirely. Since guidance runs through a laser channel, ground-based flares or EW systems can't knock the missile off course. So the operator can pick out the weakest spots and hit precisely, even targeting the engine directly. But because of the small warhead, the explosion won't be nearly as dramatic as a Javelin hit. So it might take several missiles, which makes little sense given their cost. Cost is becoming the defining metric across the board, because as we can see, the most aggressive armies in the world are the ones with bottomless arsenals. Since the price of SAMs typically runs around $100,000, Ukrainians have been searching for a cheap alternative the whole time. And it seems they've found one. This tool is changing the game, because in recent weeks, a significant number of Russian Shaheeds have been getting shot down not by manpads, but by this. It's an interceptor drone.
This is the Sting, made by Wild Hornets. It has a speed of up to 300 kilometers per hour and carries 500 grams of explosives. So far I enjoy working with it. My personal best, 20 Shaheeds in one night.
The Interceptor's cruise speed is around 170 kilometers per hour. And in a chase it can hit up to 315 kilometers per hour. Some modifications push up to 340 kilometers per hour. There are also fiber optic models, which makes them completely immune to EW jamming. But can it take down helicopters? The drone can operate at altitudes up to 5 kilometers, with a maximum ceiling of 7 kilometers, which means it can reach even high-flying recon drones. The cost of an interceptor drone is just a few $1,000s. And here's the thing. Just a few days ago, one of these drones caught a Russian Ka-52 alligator and hit it in the side. And that was no accident. It was a deliberate, targeted attack. It seems like Ukrainian interceptor drones deserve a video all of their own. Drop a comment and let us know whether you'd want to see a video where Ukrainian operators talk about them. And share your thoughts on this video too. Did you enjoy it or not?
Welcome. My name is Serhiy Lipko. This is Jesus, an instructor at the training center, and this is the American anti-materiel rifle Barrett M107A1. Jesus, sorry for the obvious question. Why is it called an anti-materiel rifle? Does it shoot and dematerialize something?
In practice, yeah. Its main job is to destroy lightly armored targets or vehicles, not what Americans call soft targets. In essence, it's the physical embodiment of one American's dream. A guy who locked himself in his garage and, looking at a Browning machine gun cartridge, thought, why not make this lighter?
1982, Ronnie Barrett, an ordinary American photographer from Tennessee, gets fired up with the idea of creating a .50 caliber rifle and stubbornly starts bringing that dream to life in his own garage with zero engineering education.
Wanting to have something I could enjoy shooting, like a .50 caliber round, I did what I usually do. I just designed my own.
In 2 months, Ronnie personally builds the first prototype on a milling machine. 2 years later, he receives an order from the Swedish Army for the first 100 rifles. And soon after, Ronnie signs a major contract with the US Army.
Someone's son or daughter is going to lie in the mud with this weapon and fight with it to the end. That's a huge responsibility, and I won't allow us to let them down.
For the Barrett family, weapons production turned into a family business. The small garage transformed into the mega corporation Barrett Firearms. Ronnie's daughter works in the company as the marketing director, and his son Chris developed the legendary Barrett MRAD.
This rifle has an internal nickname in the US military, Light 50. It weighs about 16 kilograms, around 35 pounds. So not exactly light, but if you compare it to a Browning M2, with the tripod, fully assembled, that's around 70 kilograms, about 154 pounds. So here's the situation. You need to move somewhere, take a position, and control security on a road, or operate a checkpoint. What makes more sense? Carry a machine gun you might not even use, or break this rifle into two components, split it between backpacks, bring ammo, move in, assemble it on site, and you've got something just as effective in terms of hitting power as that machine gun.
By the way, in the state of Oklahoma, there's a secret mystical gun community where Ronnie Barrett is considered the direct reincarnation of John Moses Browning, the famous inventor of that very machine gun. Too many parallels in the biographies of both designers, even their inexplicable love for .50 caliber rounds.
Jesus, it's massive, it's heavy. I've never seen such a huge sound moderator. Can you even still call that a sound moderator?
In fact, it is a sound moderator. It just works more toward improving shooting comfort, and it's got an added muzzle brake that, thanks to the reactive gas jets, also reduces recoil. It's a very comfortable weapon to operate and to shoot. The iron sights here are rated out to 1.5 kilometers, about 0.93 miles. So even without an optic, you can just take it off. Flip up the irons. For the distance you need, just raise the slider and fire in that direction. You'll hit a vehicle for sure.
Purely theoretically, could you mount a red dot with a magnifier on this?
Yes, more than that. I'll say it's actually done quite often. It's not for nothing that Call of Duty has that option. Let's put it that way.
Breaking the rifle into two components. Is that difficult?
Its genius is that it's built as a modular system that quickly splits into two. Essentially, it's a paired weapon. One rifle issued to two people.
Can we take it apart right now?
It's actually incredibly easy. In fact, we've already split it in half. From here, it's even simpler. You take this bolt, pull it back, drop it here. This, for example, will be one half.
I'll take this.
That's my half.
If you see a suspicious fighter carrying a weapon like this, the other half of the apple isn't far away.
Basically, it breaks down like this. We split it between two backpacks, move with our standard carbines and rifles to the required position.
Well, since we're already in travel mode, we might as well go shoot.
Yeah, I think we can move to the firing line.
Before we start assembling it, I'll point out the conditions we're doing this in. There's some sand here. How high is the risk that a grain of sand gets in and blows the barrel apart, considering how powerful it is?
Almost none. Again, this isn't a precision weapon. The tolerances here are very large, almost like an AK. It's not picky at all. If we assemble it correctly and everything is in place, it'll work. There's an interesting thing with the bolts on these rifles. They designed it so the bolts are not interchangeable. So if you take this bolt with you, you can leave the rifle behind. The enemy will never make it work again unless they find that exact bolt.
But on the other hand, if mine gets damaged or something happens to it, then I'm done too.
If you're part of the US Army or an allied force, you can request a replacement bolt using the rifle's unique code. They'll manufacture one for you and send it over.
All right then, Jesus. I'm handing you the keys. Let's fire it up.
All right, let's begin.
Should I start pulling mine out already?
Yeah, assemble your half.
Not much for a poor guy to assemble. I've barely got anything to do.
Locking the barrel in place, watch me line it up with the groove. Got it?
Yeah, got it. Perfect. That seated really, really well.
Bolt. Release it. That's it. Ready for use.
So load it and fire?
I think so. Go ahead. Load the rounds.
Look how many there are.
Honestly, you don't need more than one.
So realistically, a Russian BMP-2 rolls in, we put a round from this into it, and we can punch through it?
If we use certain types of ammunition. We don't have those right now. They're pretty expensive and not very common these days. These are standard machine gun rounds. There's plenty of them available, so we can at least do some shooting.
Look, it loads way easier than a pistol mag.
Oh yeah, by far.
So you'll take the first shot, right? I'll watch, see how it runs. From here I can already see... What's that sitting over there, burned out, lightly armored and miserable?
These are the remains of a BMP.
And what's the distance roughly?
About 500 meters, around 1,640 feet. A pretty typical target for an anti-materiel weapon.
With God?
With God. Chambering a round. Let's start with the left side of the BMP. Shot.
All right, now let's go for the right side.
Shot.
From here it feels like it'd be hard to miss, but we'll try.
Almost impossible.
I feel a crazy level of responsibility right now. I just want to settle in properly, so when that recoil hits hard, at least you're still in one piece.
You'll know whether you did everything right or not. Because if you did, when you hit the BMP, you'll see the flash through the scope yourself. Ready?
Ready.
All right, let's go.
Shot.
Hit confirmed.
Oh. The first thing that hits you is a blast of powder gases straight into your face.
And only after a moment does the recoil reach you. It's actually kind of soft, almost pleasant.
I fired the shot, and my thoughts were, I missed, and then, am I even still alive in this position?
Told you, it's very user-friendly. Relax and just send rounds down range.
Ready.
Observing.
Shot.
Hit. Same spot.
No way. That moment when you fire, you're supposed to keep your eyes open. That's how professionals do it. But here, if your eyes are open, they start watering a bit from the powder gases.
Childlike joy.
And that thing you mentioned about rifles, interesting point. That snipers develop a high tolerance in the eye membranes because there's always sand getting in.
Yeah, and not just powder gases. You're forced to blink less to keep your eye hydrated, and over time, you just get used to it. If we're talking about precision rifles, there are nuances, vision specifics, how optics behave, even ballistic glasses, which aren't prescription and don't affect your eyesight. can still slightly alter the direction of light rays that are supposed to focus on your eye. That can lead to small misses. And in precision shooting, you're fighting for every millimeter of accuracy. So rifles are often used without glasses.
A huge sound moderator, a massive suppressor for such large calibers. I'm going to try firing without ear protection because honestly, from our side it doesn't seem that loud.
Right? It's designed to suppress most of the sound and direct the rest forward. But a shot from a weapon like this can't be hidden. Even if you somehow made it completely silent and flashless here, that massive, heavy bullet would still travel downrange, making plenty of noise. You'd know exactly where you're being shot from with a caliber like this.
Feels good being on this side of a monster like that. I'll try without ear protection.
В принципі. О, отак, готовий.
Yeah, like that? Good. Safety off, relax, just enjoy the recoil.
Shot. What we just tested on the ears, perfect. Feels super comfortable.
Like I said, user-friendly.
Jesus, to sum up this rifle,
Basically, it's built so that you can hand it to almost any soldier. 20 minutes of instruction on how to use it, and they're ready to carry out missions.
what would you improve or change about it based on your experience?
Objectively, it's already in a perfectly functional state for the tasks it was designed for. You're not going to make it better.
A perfectly functional tool for engaging vehicles, lightly armored targets, and for filming a show on Army TV. Jesus, thank you very much for this walkthrough, for the chance to fire it. Thank you for your time. Much respect for your service.
Scrapped junk being disposed of cheaply in the war in Ukraine?
Seems like I'm stuck.
Or reliable armored all-terrain vehicles? Tough, no-nonsense workhorses.
Any puddle, any muddy slope we've got, she pulls through beautifully.
And well-armed on top of that?
Aviation cannon, very high rate of fire.
And easy to learn too?
The guys pick it up really fast, literally sit down and drive.
So what are the odds for this old iron in modern combat?
It only fires from a static position, because on the move, it has no stabilizer, it's useless.
How did Swedish PBV-302 armored vehicles from the Cold War era get their very first combat baptism in the 21st century, already well into retirement?
This vehicle is a 64 build.
And how useful, despite their age, have they actually proven to Ukrainian forces? So what do we usually picture when we hear Swedish weapons? Reliable? No fuss Gripen? Fighter jets? Sniper self-propelled howitzers like the Archer? State-of-the-art CV-90 IFVs? Sure, absolutely. But Swedish weapons, like anyone else's, weren't always quite this cutting edge. At first glance, this is the ugly duckling, a textbook example of Western Cold War armor. If this design looks a little strange to you too, hit like, but make sure you watch the story all the way through, and you'll understand exactly why it looks the way it does. Does it remind you of another very well-known vehicle? Of course it does. The legendary American APC, the M113. So are they related? No, just the same age. And that kind of design was extremely common back then. In the early 1960s, neutral Sweden was selecting a new armored vehicle for its military. The M113, cutting edge at the time, was on the table. But it was considered too expensive to produce and not well enough armed. And oddly enough, the Swedish military wasn't happy with the ramp, too slow. So they built a similar vehicle, but their own, the PBV-302. with doors instead of a ramp.
Ці двері вони мають два положення для
For example, these doors have two closing positions. To close them in the normal, unhurried way, we just close them. If we need a quick close, we flip out a special leg and shut the door. No handle needed, nothing. They don't seal tight, but it's very fast when you need it.
From 1966 to 1971, the Swedish defense industry produced around 6,500 of these vehicles.
На той час.
For its time, it was genuinely a comfortable armored vehicle, one that infantry could actually enjoy riding in.
They served faithfully until the end of the 20th century, until the next generation CV-90s came along to replace them. The PBV-302 was finally retired only in 2014, but not scrapped, at least not all of them. And in May 2024, the Swedish government announced the transfer of all available vehicles to Ukraine, around 200 units. They were pulled back literally from the scrap heap of history, hopelessly outdated, morally and physically, but in fully working condition. And Ukrainian soldiers aren't known for being picky. They've seen worse.
Good vehicle, nothing bad to say about it. Sure, it has its quirks, but a machine of that age, and it still works, still gets the job done.
On top of that, on the Russian side, the equipment is generally from the same era. Soviet IFVs that didn't earn their grim reputation as infantry mass graves for nothing. So why do Western and Soviet armored vehicles look so different on the outside? In the Soviet Union, for decades the visual profile of vehicles was kept as low as possible. As a result, there was catastrophically little interior space in both the BMP-1 and BMP-2. In the West, user comfort was a much higher priority. So which armored vehicle design do you prefer? Let us know in the comments.
десантне відділення у нас.
The troop compartment has 8 seats for dismounts, 8 seats total, plus storage space where the troops can keep their weapons, extra ammo, or rations they're carrying with them. If you compare it to the BMP-1, well, to Soviet automotive and military equipment in general, this machine was already designed with people in body armor in mind. You can see what the troop compartment looks like. I mean, at my height, when I think back to how I used to fold myself into that BMP, it was pretty rough. In here, it's a lot more manageable.
But is it really just about comfort? Or is there perhaps a different reason for all that extra space? Even back in the 1960s, Sweden was already thinking about the fastest possible evacuation of the wounded, and deliberately didn't rely solely on dedicated medical transport.
Евакуації більше 4 поранених.
If we need to evacuate 4 wounded, guys on stretchers, we break all of this down, it all comes off, the mounted equipment gets removed, hung on the seats, and we can lay 2 casualties up top and 2 down below.
Is there anything else that backs up this theory? Well, for example, unlike the troop compartment, the crew stations for the commander, gunner, and driver are anything but spacious. They're cramped, to put it plainly.
This here is the gunner's position. Seems like there's even less room here. I'll still try to get in, but there's a real risk I won't be able to get back out on my own, and someone will have to drag me.
Even for a person of average build, working in conditions like that isn't exactly comfortable.
I don't know. You'd need some kind of dwarves working in here. I'm 1 m 76 at about 5'9", and for me this is a serious squeeze.
Does that mean the PBV-302 is unfriendly to its crew? Not exactly, because the vehicle has other very significant advantages. If the reliable Volvo engine has some minor breakdown, it can be fixed without ever leaving the cab.
Продумано.
The engine access is really well thought out. It sits under the cover you're actually sitting on. The cover comes off with 3 bolts right here. If we've got a hose, a sensor, a filter change, or we need to bleed the system, we do all of that without leaving the vehicle, right from the commander's seat.
If you want to know everything about Western equipment in the war in Ukraine, make sure you subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. In terms of engineering quality, the Swedish armored vehicle clearly beats its Soviet contemporaries.
Нам м'якша.
On those, just to remove the starter, you practically had to pull half the engine out. Here it's all accessible. Yeah, nice touch. She's smoother, this PBV, in the way she drives. Maybe some of you know, on the BMP, if a gear jams, you've got to wrestle with it to knock it loose. Here it's the opposite, just like a regular vehicle.
Another undeniable advantage, the PBV-302 is fitted with a remote track tension adjustment system. First, that's about how quickly you can adapt to different road surfaces. Second, it's about crew safety. They don't have to step outside for something minor.
Де ми будемо проїжджати, ми зможемо чи
Wherever we're driving, we can either tighten or loosen the tracks depending on the conditions. At the training base, we put a pretty serious number of kilometers on it. Not once did the tracks throw a shoe. Compared to our BMPs, it's very hard to detrack.
So how does all of this translate into off-road performance for a vehicle that doesn't exactly look the part? Ukrainian soldiers are genuinely impressed by it.
по своїй прохідності вона
It's practically on par with the BMP, maybe even better in some ways. Any puddle, any muddy slope we've got, she pulls through beautifully.
So what about the weapons? Unlike the M113, which only has a machine gun for self-defense, the PBV-302 was fitted with a 20mm automatic cannon.
It's an aviation cannon, very high rate of fire, but the ammunition feeds through a magazine. The magazine is 3-row, and we can load 30 rounds.
And that cannon can fire up to 8 rounds per second, meaning that in an intense firefight, you'll be swapping magazines every few seconds. And every one of those pauses is a window of opportunity for the enemy.
If we run out of rounds in the cannon, we can't fire. Can't fire, we're as good as dead.
So how much of a design flaw is this? For comparison, American Bradleys and Soviet BMP-2s feed ammunition in belts of several hundred rounds, which allows sustained fire for far longer without interruption. On top of that, the PBV-302's cannon has no stabilizer, so it can't fire on the move.
Since it has no stabilizer, it only fires from a static position. On the move, it's chaotic. Rounds going nowhere. We need to work a tree line. We stop, the gunner acquires the target, we fire, and then we move.
Back in the 1960s, the PBV-302 was adopted specifically as an infantry fighting vehicle. But by modern standards, its firepower can be described as limited, and that's putting it generously. That said, beyond ground targets, this cannon can also engage aerial threats.
There's also a separate sight for engaging aerial targets. It's mounted here on the turret. We can fire on low-flying targets up to 2 kilometers, about 1.2 miles, away. But I have to be up on top of the turret to do it, and search for targets myself.
In practice, though, that function isn't unique to this vehicle. Plenty of other armored vehicles nominally have it too. But given the primitive sighting equipment, in reality they'd have a hard time hitting anything other than a helicopter hovering in place. So can the PBV-302 really be called an IFV? Probably not. It's more of an APC, an armored all-terrain carrier. But how well does it actually protect its crew? Like any light armored vehicle of that era, the PBV-302 has bullet-resistant armor. And in today's environment, that's simply not enough. Though as we know, even the legendary American Abrams tank wasn't ready for modern threats. When strike drones dominate the battlefield this completely, every piece of equipment needs specialized protection.
The grills, we welded those on ourselves at the repair battalion. The guys put in the work. The camo net we stretched ourselves too. They only pre-installed the anti-drone pipe frames for us.
So how well does this improvised protection actually hold up? All these nets and grills make an already limited view from inside the vehicle even worse, and skilled FPV drone operators eventually find the weak spots anyway. But the armor does protect what matters most, the lives of the crew, who usually manage to get out before the vehicle is completely destroyed. So what's the bottom line? By modern standards, the PBV-302 is clearly not a frontline combat vehicle.
As you can see, it's very uncomfortable for both the driver and the gunner. I don't know, these are some kind of old standards. Maybe people were smaller back then. These days, you've got big, solid guys. From a safety standpoint, it's a minus, because you can't be in there wearing body armor and a helmet. Yeah, it is what it is.
So this APC typically handles logistics tasks instead.
We use it for personnel rotations, for evacuating the wounded, the 300s. You can see for yourself, it's done much faster here. No need for all that maneuvering, stripping off body armor and so on. And in terms of mobility and armor, it runs circles around Soviet equipment.
Given the vehicle's limited capabilities, is this whole thing even worth it? And does this particular piece of Swedish aid actually deserve genuine gratitude? To answer that, just look at what the Russians are trying to advance with. civilian cars, motorcycles, horses, and yes, even donkeys. And none of that is because of some twisted fondness for extreme adventure. They are catastrophically short on armored vehicles. So any vehicle that has even some armor, some weapons, and decent off-road capability is already a serious advantage over an enemy that's literally saddling up donkeys. Can a donkey compete with an APC on the battlefield? Drop your thoughts in the comments. The 11th hit, and game over. This is a Leopard 2 that just walked straight into a perfect trap. Here's how it was set up. The Leopard 2 rolls into a firing position like a mammoth that makes the ground shake. Russian infantry is shaking too, huddled among the trees in a tree line. Boom! But immediately after the shot, the Leopard 2 turns into a rabbit. What happened? The tank commander realizes it's a trap. Sure enough, a few seconds later, the first mortar round detonates behind the tank. Undershoot. The next round explodes literally in front of the driver. But the Leopard 2 punches through the debris. Another round comes in and detonates just a few meters ahead. The zone is perfectly zeroed in. The Leopard 2 maneuvers like mad, because Russian mortar crews can sometimes drop a round right on target. It's a lottery. The forest is the only way out. But what if that's a trap too? The Leopard 2 crashes into the forest, but they're already waiting. The first drone gets tangled in the net, but detonates and partially destroys the protective mesh. The second drone reaches the turret, but the frontal armor holds. The third drone comes in from the rear. The tank reverses and tries to break away from this killing zone. The crew is fighting to save the vehicle, but a few hundred meters later, another drone hits the rear again. Speed is gone. From here, the Russian UAV operators take their time. The Leopard 2 stops. The mammoth hunt is almost over. But wait, it's not over. Look, the engine fires back up. That emergency mode is an absolute lifesaver. The Leopard 2 crawls forward like a wounded animal. But a few hundred meters further on, the tank finally stops for good. No one's coming to help. After the 11th hit, the Leopard 2 catches fire. Game over. So what exactly just happened? The infantry in the forest was bait. For Russian commanders, using live bait against the Leopard 2 isn't forbidden. But why didn't the Russians use ATGMs or artillery? If you think this was random, it wasn't. You're about to find out why. Along the way, you'll also see the weakest spots on the German tank that the Russians have figured out. 10 ways to kill a Leopard 2 and what German engineers actually think about all of it. But before, hit like and subscribe to our channel. Your support matters. So, to destroy a stationary tank, Russian artillery crews need an average of 30 to 50 rounds of 152mm ammunition. Factor in corrections and adjustments, and that takes a lot of time. Enough for the tank to do its job and get out, while the artillery crew itself becomes a target for counter-battery fire. But there are things out there far more dangerous to tanks than artillery. When 12 Turkish Leopard 2A4s were destroyed in Syria, it became clear that the biggest threat to German tanks came from Russian ATGMs. The Cornet, for example, punches clean through. But in Ukraine, it's a different story, because the Ukrainians have learned to deal with that threat. First, the Turkish tanks were knocked out by anti-tank missiles while sitting stationary, like they were on a training range. Ukrainians don't make that mistake. And second, Ukrainian Leopard 2 commanders discovered the magic of the standard Perry R-17 panoramic sight.
When I told an instructor from Canada about this, he was blown away. Then he took off his Royal Troops patch and gave it to me.
Here's the explanation. The Leopard 2 commander can look through his own sight and also switch to the gunner's sight to see his picture. But it turned out the toggle switch has a third position, mix. The commander sees both pictures simultaneously, his own and the gunner's. But nobody teaches this during the standard 40-day training course, because the instructor's main job is to get crews through the basic tactical drills. War, though, is always an accelerated education. So how does that third toggle position actually help against ATGMs? In mix mode, the Leopard 2 commander becomes a two-faced Janus. He watches his gun tracking onto the target, while at the same time catching an enemy missile launch from the flank out of the corner of his eye. His move? There are two options here, and neither of them is a farewell prayer, even if the anti-tank missile is already flying at 300 meters per second. Option 1. Pop smoke grenades and immediately reposition under cover of the screen. The specialized metallic particles in the smoke scatter the laser beam. The missile simply loses its guidance signal and goes dumb. Option 2. Hit the priority button and swing the heavy turret toward the new target at 40 degrees per second. The new target instantly appears in the gunner's sight. No explanation needed. All the gunner has to do is hit the laser rangefinder button so the computer calculates the correction. Then pull the trigger. Boom! There isn't a single piece of footage online from ATGM operators who found themselves on the receiving end of a Leopard 2. That's not a coincidence. A high-explosive fragmentation round flies at around 1,000 meters per second and leaves nothing but a wet spot after impact. Russian ATGM operators simply don't get the chance to post their videos. But there's plenty of footage online of Russian drones tearing apart Western tanks, including the Leopard 2. That said, actually killing a tank with a drone isn't that straightforward, because the warhead is small, so first you have to immobilize the tank. How? For example, with an anti-tank mine. The fragments can't punch through German armor, but if a track takes the hit, the tank stops. Then it either gets finished off with ATGMs or pounded with drones until the ammunition cooks off. Another way to snap a track is to hit it with a drone or a lancet. Destroying a track or road wheel instantly kills the tank's mobility, but hitting a moving tank's track with an FPV drone is a difficult shot. The closer the drone gets to the ground, the more interference it picks up from the terrain. On top of that, rubber or armored side skirts usually cover the top section of the track. To snap it, you have to hit the exposed lower section or the drive sprocket. So operators tend to go for the engine compartment. Right here, into one of these two large ring radiators that cool the engine coolant and transmission fluid. That's the Leopard 2's most vulnerable spot. But as you've already seen, one hit is often not enough. The thing is, the fluid-filled radiators absorb the blow, but the engine and transmission sitting underneath them stay intact. That's exactly why the Leopard 2 keeps moving even after multiple hits. By the way, the Swedish STR V122, built on the Leopard 2 platform, shares the exact same vulnerabilities. You can find the video about the Swedish tank and its luckier fate after a Russian drone attack on our channel. But then why do Russian drones keep hitting the turret if they can't punch through it? Because the gun mantlet is also one of the few weak zones in the frontal profile. Due to the placement of the barrel and the sighting systems, the armor there is thinner. On top of that, this is where the external optics are mounted. And without them, the Leopard 2 turns into an armored tractor, because it can no longer engage targets with any precision. The turret-to-hull junction is also a vulnerable spot. A precise hit there can jam the turret traverse mechanism, effectively knocking the tank out as a combat unit. Generally speaking, FPV drones typically carry an RPG-7 warhead. The shaped charge jet from that warhead can punch through up to 500 millimeters of rolled homogeneous steel armor. That's more than enough, with room to spare, to go straight through the turret roof, because the armor up top is no more than 40 millimeters thick. But in practice, that almost never happens. Why? There are several critical factors that save the Leopard 2. First, the shaped charge jet forms too early when it hits the protective cages or nets, losing its penetrating power before it reaches the main armor. The net tears, burns, but the main armor stays untouched. Second, the ERA that Ukrainians bolt onto the Leopard 2 themselves detonates into the jet and disrupts it, so it can no longer punch through even thin armor. Third, a shaped charged jet only works at full efficiency on a perfectly perpendicular impact. If the drone hits at a sharp angle, the jet deflects across the metal surface. That's why we often see a bright flash from the warhead. But the tank keeps rolling, because the main armor is intact. So drones aren't an automatic death sentence. But the risks for tanks and their crews are very real. So what do the German engineers think about all this? Representatives from Rheinmetall are rethinking the entire protection concept. The Leopard 2 was designed for tank duels where rounds come in from the front, but now they're developing solutions to reinforce exactly the zones that are getting hit from above. It's a slow process because German engineers are not Ukrainian housewives who can knock together a solution overnight. But the key question is, how do you do this without radically increasing the tank's weight? The first solution is the Trophy Active Protection System, which is currently being integrated into the Leopard 2A7 and A8. Trophy is designed to intercept drones on their approach using countershots. Rheinmetall engineers are also pushing the idea that a tank can no longer protect itself on its own. They're proposing that the Leopard 2 be escorted by air defense systems like the Sky Ranger, cannons with programmable ammunition that create a shrapnel cloud and destroy drone swarms at distances up to 2 kilometers. Companies Titan and KNDS have developed an interesting anti-UAV complex that launches interceptor drones, specifically integrating the Interceptor S air defense drone onto the Boxer RCT-30APC. Similar technology could end up on tanks. And here's something worth noting. The Germans have finally acknowledged the effectiveness of cope cages and have started developing factory-built protection solutions. New Leopard variants are already coming with standard mounting points for lightweight mesh structures. On top of that, engineers are working on integrating modular EW systems directly into the tank's electronics. The electronic dome is designed to cut the drone's link to its operator at 50 to 100 meters before impact. That said, both Ukrainians and Russians are already fitting EW systems to their tanks, but it's not 100% protection, because frequencies keep changing, and fiber optic drones don't care about jamming at all. So the problem remains unsolved. But drop a comment with your own idea for protecting a tank. The most interesting suggestions we'll pass on directly to Ukrainian tankers, somewhere in Donbass. 2026. Imagine a Russian anti-tank gunner peering through the optics of his weapon. Bursting through the smoke and the churning mud is a monstrous 15-ton armored beast. Relying on decades of ingrained Soviet doctrine, the gunner doesn't hesitate. He does what he has been trained to do with every piece of mechanized armor he has ever faced. He aims dead center at the left side of the cabin. One perfect lethal shot to eliminate the driver, paralyze the vehicle, and then drones will turn it into a steel coffin. He pulls the trigger. The impact is deafening. The heavy armor shudders violently under the explosive force. But the beast doesn't stop. It doesn't swerve. It doesn't even slow down. It simply roars right out of the kill zone, leaving the gunner in a state of absolute shock. Why? Because Russian military doctrine failed to account for one crucial, life-saving geographical detail. This is the Australian Bushmaster. And in Australia, the steering wheel is on the right. The driver wasn't even sitting where the rocket hit.
At first, the Russians thought the driver sat on the left, but this is an Australian vehicle. When they finally figured out the driver was on the right side, they started shooting to the right.
When Australian engineers first rolled out this massive machine, even their own soldiers shook their heads, laughing at its awkward, top-heavy silhouette. They mockingly dubbed it the pregnant hyena. Skeptics argued it was too big, too clumsy, and too vulnerable for a real high-intensity war. Yet today, from the suffocating, freezing mud of the Donbass to the fiercely contested fields of the Kursk region, Ukrainian paratroopers don't call it a hyena. They call it the ultimate armored taxi. It is their guardian angel forged in steel. This is the story of how a vehicle born for the burning deserts of the outback became a waking nightmare for the enemy, surviving everything from buried anti-tank mines to the terrifying new generation Russian fiber optic drones. But before we move forward, we want to announce our upcoming exclusive video about M777 from the 1st Assault Regiment.
Don't forget to subscribe to the Weapons of Victory channel and hope to see you soon.
To understand how this machine defies death, we have to rewind to the 1990s. The Australian Military Command came to a sobering realization. They didn't just need a transport truck. They needed a mobile fortress, a machine that could carry troops across vast hostile terrains while completely shielding them from the deadly threat of hidden explosives. The project, codenamed Bushranger, was brought to life by a brilliant collaboration between the Irish firm Timony and Australia's Perry Engineering, a company we know today as the defense giant Thales Australia. The vehicle they birthed was an absolute Goliath. It stretches over 7 meters in length, stands a towering 2.65 meters high, and crushes the scales at nearly 15 tons. To a layman, that massive towering profile looks like a fatal engineering flaw, a gigantic bullseye on the battlefield. But the brutal physics of modern warfare proved the exact opposite. The science of survival dictates a simple rule. The higher the human body sits from the epicenter of an explosive blast, the greater the chances of walking away with a beating heart. The statistics from the Ukrainian front lines are nothing short of miraculous. Out of the 120 Bushmasters delivered to the Ukrainian armed forces, plunged into the most intense combat on Earth, only 5 have been definitively destroyed. That is not just reliability. That is structural immortality. So, how exactly does the Bushmaster cheat death time and time again? Its ultimate secret weapon lies beneath the soldier's boots. The vehicle is built around a central armored capsule, mated to a deep, violently angled V-shaped hull. When an anti-tank mine detonates beneath the tires, the explosive shockwave doesn't smash flat against the bottom of the truck. Instead, the V-hull acts like the sharp bow of a battleship crashing through a tidal wave. It physically slices the blast energy in half, deflecting the catastrophic force outward and away from the fragile human bodies sitting inside. Listen to the testimony of a Ukrainian soldier. His Bushmaster was tearing down a frontline road when it hit not 1, but 2 anti-tank mines simultaneously. The sheer violence of the blast ripped the heavy wheels right off the axles and completely obliterated the rear trunk section. The crew was thrown like rag dolls, suffering concussions from the acoustic shock, but as the dust settled, a miracle revealed itself. The V-hull had held its ground. The floor didn't rupture. Every single man climbed out of that wreckage alive. Another frontline fighter, Volodymyr, an 82mm mortar shell shrieked from the sky and detonated right beside the Bushmaster's massive tire. The explosion was deafening, yet inside the cabin, not a single soldier suffered a scratch. But the paranoid brilliance of the Australian engineers goes even deeper than the hull. Hidden right beneath the floorboards is a 200-liter water tank. In a civilian vehicle, that's just a reservoir. In the Bushmaster, it's a fluid armor layer. When a mine goes off, that dense body of water absorbs a massive chunk of the kinetic shockwave. And what about the armor itself? The entire interior of the troop cabin is meticulously lined with high-grade Kevlar. If a heavy projectile hits the outside, the Kevlar catches the deadly metal spalling, the shrapnel that breaks off from the inside of the armor, preventing it from ricocheting around the cabin. A Ukrainian driver with the call sign TUR perfectly encapsulates the surreal sense of security inside this beast. When the shrapnel is beating against the side of the vehicle, you just hear this muffled ding ding ding, and absolutely nothing else. You are untouched. The massive reinforced bulletproof glass casually shrugs off direct bursts from 12.7mm heavy machine guns, and if enemy fire manages to obliterate the external 300-liter fuel tank in a massive fireball, the engineers planned for that too. Tucked safely inside the armored capsule is a hidden 19-liter emergency reserve tank. It holds just enough fuel to let the crippled machine sprint out of the kill zone and carry its men to safety. There are even verified combat reports where this incredibly stubborn armored capsule took 2 direct point-blank hits from a rocket-propelled grenade, and the crew still survived to fight another day. But make no mistake, the Bushmaster is not just a passive, rolling bunker. It is a predator. Mounted high on its roof is a remote weapon station, a mechanized turret armed with either a 7.62 machine gun or a devastating Mark 19 automatic grenade launcher. The magic of this system is that the gunner never has to risk his life by popping his torso out of a hatch. He sits deep in the absolute, armored safety of the capsule. Gripping a joystick and staring intensely at a high-definition monitor, he hunts his targets with the cold, clinical precision of a video game. A gunner going by the call sign Solodkai explains the true terror this module inflicts on the enemy. The turret rotates a seamless 360 degrees, and its greatest asset is a phenomenal military-grade thermal imager. The gunner can calibrate the contrast so that the freezing Ukrainian tree lines appear pitch black, while the heat signatures of Russian infantry glow blindingly white. It turns the gunner into an apex predator in the dead of night, allowing him to spot, track, and annihilate threats from distances the enemy cannot even fathom. According to pristine Western military standards, the Bushmaster was designed for a relatively comfortable ride. 2 crew members up front and a squad of 8 to 9 infantrymen in the back. But the brutal, desperate reality of the Ukrainian war doesn't care about factory manuals or comfort. When heavy Russian artillery is raining down, tearing the earth apart, and men need to be evacuated instantly, 15 to 18 heavily armed, adrenaline-fueled Ukrainian soldiers will pack themselves into that cabin in a frantic 15 to 20 seconds. To drag 15 tons of steel and 18 armored men through the notoriously thick, glue-like mud of the Donbass, the Bushmaster relies on a roaring 300-horsepower Caterpillar engine, seamlessly paired with a heavy-duty Allison automatic transmission. Because of its remarkably soft, fully independent suspension system, wounded soldiers don't suffer the agonizing, bone-jarring bouncing that is so typical of Soviet-era armored personnel carriers during medical evacuations. And for the suffocating, sweltering heat of the Ukrainian summer, the troop compartment alone is fitted with an incredibly powerful air conditioning system, blasting through 8 heavy-duty vents, keeping the men focused and alert. If the beast finally meets its match and gets bogged down in a crater, it possesses the means to save itself. Anchored dead center in the vehicle is a massive, high-powered winch. The steel cable can be fed out to the front or routed straight out the back, allowing the Bushmaster to literally rip its own massive weight out of a swamp or drag another piece of bogged-down armor back from the brink of capture. Yet every fortress has a vulnerability, and the battlefield is an ever-evolving ecosystem of death. Today, the undisputed terror of the sky is the FPV kamikaze drone, and the Bushmaster's massive, towering size makes it a highly visible target from above. In August 2024, during the daring operations in the Kursk region, Russian forces hunted this very vehicle using their absolute newest weapon. It doesn't rely on hackable radio waves. Instead, it is piloted via a 50-kilometer unwinding spool of fiber optic cable. This makes it completely, utterly immune to every traditional electronic warfare jammer on the battlefield. But the blood and sweat of the Ukrainian combat experience are not being spilled in vain. This war is fundamentally rewriting global defense manufacturing in real time. Seeing this terrifying new threat raining from the skies, Thales Australia immediately launched Project Land 156. They are right now testing the Bushmaster with a cutting-edge, artificial intelligence-driven anti-drone system built by the American tech company Dedrone. This isn't just a standard jammer. This is smart jamming. The AI system creates an invisible dome, detecting, identifying, and intercepting enemy drones, even while the Bushmaster is tearing down a dirt road at top speed. It intelligently filters out false alarms, ensuring the crew can focus entirely on the mission. The evolution doesn't stop there. Anticipating the future of stealth warfare, engineers are already putting a fully electric version of the Bushmaster to the ultimate test. Stripped of its heavy, noisy combustion engine, this new variant is 2 tons lighter, moves in absolute, ghostly silence, and boasts a combat range of up to 100 kilometers. Throughout the grinding horror of this war, the Bushmaster has transcended its physical components of metal, glass, and gears. From the lightning-fast, historic counteroffensive in the Kharkiv region to the grueling, unpredictable maneuvers in Kursk, it continues to execute its one sacred mission. It refuses to let its soldiers die. It brings them home. And judging by how fiercely, how rapidly this Australian machine is evolving under the intense, unforgiving pressure of the Ukrainian battlefield, its legendary status is only just beginning to be written. What do you think of this masterpiece of Australian armor? Could this be the best armored transport of the modern era? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Show me your hands. On your knees, please. These are just basic forms of address from a well-mannered man. Please and thank you. That's why I talk like that. I'm not going to shoot. I'm an American. I don't really understand Russian. And that's an important point. Staying calm with the enemy. Showing that you control the situation. Showing them you're not about to put a round between their eyes the second they drop to their knees. Enjoy your meal. In that area there were 4 Russians. 2 surrendered quickly, and 2 more stayed inside the dugout. So I tossed 3 grenades in through the chimney. Then I waited for our FPV drone to come in and blow the door off. After that, I realized I had a solid chance to clear that dugout. All right. Show me your hands. I cleared the dugout and took those 2 prisoner. I'm not going to shoot. I'm an American. I don't really understand Russian. Then we moved them to a nearby position, and from there they were evacuated off the line of contact. Quiet. Get these guys into cover.
You've definitely seen this video of an incredibly polite American taking a Russian prisoner. Let's give you a bit more context. This soldier is fighting in the Ghosts unit, 63rd Separate Mechanized Brigade of the 3rd Army Corps. We wanted to introduce you to him a bit more. Hello, good to see you.
Hi, nice to meet you. You're wounded? He says it's been hurting for a long time. I'm from California, USA, and I've been here almost a year.
Yeah, this definitely isn't California. It's a lot colder here.
Yeah, much colder. As a Californian, I wasn't ready for this kind of weather. But there are other guys from California here too. And overall, we're figuring it out somehow.
We're recording this interview in English, but honestly, it feels like we could do it in Ukrainian too. Your Ukrainian is incredible. I'd say you sound almost like a local. Especially remembering that moment when you took those Russians prisoner. That was an insane level of language skill. I'm talking about that now legendary video where you spoke to them so politely.
Do you have a lighter?
But that's actually dangerous. You must have been really nervous. In those conditions, especially when you need to be extremely careful, it would probably be more comfortable to speak English. But you were speaking Ukrainian.
It's all good. It's all good. Come here. It's all good. Wounded? Yeah, I've had a lot of Ukrainian teachers, and again, it's just basic manners. Please and thank you. That's why I talk like that. I've taken quite a few Russians prisoner already. And there have been a lot of firefights too. So now, when it's time to engage or take prisoners, just doing the job, I'm much calmer. I feel pretty comfortable because during these ops we have contact almost every day. Sometimes we clear several positions in a single day. So it's something not just I've done many times, but my whole group has. And that's key, staying calm with the enemy, showing you're in control. It's all good. I'm not gonna shoot. Showing them you're not about to put a bullet between their eyes the moment they kneel. Not scaring them. It makes my job easier. Less chance they'll try to run. Less chance they'll start firing if they think that's their only option. For me, when I'm carrying out a mission, it's just work.
Now that we have somewhat of a sense on how to clear houses. This will be the next step when it comes to working as a team. The guns, the rifles will be orientated on this building, allowing Bravo team to come and take this building.
I try not to shut off my feelings and emotions. So yeah, I try to stay as calm, cold-blooded and collected as possible.
So it's like a conversational Ukrainian practice club. On Russians?
Yeah, I've got Infantry Ukrainian.
Storm the Peter,
But I don't know how to say drop a like and subscribe.
In the infantry, that's normal. You can go uncensored here, right?
Well, then you can add,
Пиздец and нахуй and all those заебись.
Yeah, those are definitely popular phrases. They're not in the Ranger handbook, but they're very popular.
Into this fucking room by them fucking self unfucking covered. So you have to fucking stack up right here on this fucking door. Wait for a fucking squeeze after you say fucking door left.
Okay, what can you say about Russian soldiers?
what can I say about them? I've met former criminals. There was a guy from Uzbekistan who used to work in Russia. He got caught with a gram of weed, marijuana. They told him, either they beat and rape you, or prison. Or you go serve in the army for a year. He chose the army. And the moment he got to the front, he walked toward our positions and surrendered to the first drone he saw. There were also prisoners who said they had sick relatives and needed money for treatment. I once asked a Russian, and one guy said he's here because he loves Russia. But most of the time, it's the same story. They sign a contract to make money, think it'll be easy, and then they get sent to the front with minimal gear and minimal training.
Did you have prior military experience? Did you serve before this war?
Yeah, I served 4 years in the US Marine Corps. The tactics I use here, I've taken some from training with the Green Berets, some from training with the Israeli Defense Forces, and of course some from the Marines. And some are tactics we picked up here in Ukraine. I try to take the best tactics from all worlds. And that's what we drill every day in my unit.
Everywhere, security. Control TAM, TAM, Viklo TAM, Viklo TAM, и так, и все.
Your group is called Ghosts. Can you tell us more about it?
At first, the group was mostly foreigners. 3 foreigners and 1 Ukrainian from different battalions. We came together and started working in the forest as a reconnaissance and assault group, as well as a clearing team. We showed good results, so our brigade, our battalion, decided to keep using us in that role. It all started last fall. And since then, we've done a lot of good work. A lot of effective work.
So, it's super important that when we have the first man breach and go inside this room, that somebody's right there.
Honestly, this is my new home now. Kramatorsk, especially Sloviansk. I already see these places as home. When I went on leave, I didn't go back to the US. I decided to stay in Ukraine and get to know it better. I've been living here for a year, and all that time I've been in the same operational area, fighting for the same cities. So now I see them as my home. One of my first impressions when I came here was, oh, people are probably going to be cold, maybe even harsh, not very friendly. But then, You talk for 10 minutes, and suddenly you're being invited over for borscht. That's something I really love about this country.
Останній чоловік буде цей так штурмувати будинок. Добре? Заєбісь.